Have you ever seen something so ridiculously petty and jaw-droppingly outrageous that you didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or just slow clap? That's exactly what I felt as I tightened the last bolt on a 6-foot wooden fence, one that now stood tall and proud, dividing the lakefront right down the middle. Grass, dock, and even water didn't escape its reach. It sliced through the shoreline like a courtroom diagram, perfectly straight and utterly absurd. Behind me, a dozen stunned neighbors watched in slack-jawed silence. Across the fence stood Margaret, the infamous cousin of our even more infamous HOA president, Karen, frozen in disbelief as her luxury loungers and half-finished jet ski ramp now sat exiled behind a wall of lumber she never saw coming. This absurd spectacle was the final act in a 5-year saga that began the day I bought my dream home in Willowbrook Estates. One of the big selling points? Deeded lake access. The property came with shared rights to a sandy beach and a community dock, basically, a summer paradise for my family. Every weekend, we'd swim, fish, and unwind until the sun dipped below the water. Then came Karen Fitzgerald. 6 months ago, Karen wormed her way into the HOA presidency, and everything changed. She morphed from friendly neighbor to HOA tyrant faster than you could say, code violation. Suddenly, we were being fined for things like dandelions and the wrong style of mailbox. Wind chimes were outlawed. Planting flowers required pre-approval. It was a bureaucratic fever dream, and it only got worse. Karen began using her power like a medieval queen, rewarding loyalists and punishing dissenters. Her brother-in-law landed a paid gig as the official landscape compliance officer. Her high school bestie? Now in charge of pool maintenance. And then, one day, Margaret arrived. Margaret came for a visit and never left. And thanks to Karen's royal decree, she apparently had full control of the shared lakefront. But she wasn't just sunbathing, she was colonizing. I'm talking full-on resort mode, giant lounge chairs, tiki torches, outdoor speakers, and a DIY jet ski ramp that blocked the dock and view entirely. At first, I approached Margaret politely. I introduced myself, gently reminded her the space was communal. She sneered like I'd stepped on royal carpet and waved a document in my face, some flimsy easement reassignment she claimed gave her exclusive rights. It had HOA letterhead and Karen's signature, and she told me if I didn't like it, I could file a complaint. So I did. I contacted the city and county offices. Turns out, not only was the lakefront deeded to my property, but the HOA had zero authority to reassign it without a formal vote and legal filings. Karen's so-called easement? Completely bogus. At the next HOA meeting, I presented the findings. Karen responded like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. Her face turned crimson, her hands shook, and she declared, loudly, that the HOA had recently passed new bylaws giving it full control over all lakefront matters. She waved another mysterious document supposedly ratified in a meeting no one remembered. Meanwhile, Margaret turned up the volume, literally. Her parties got louder, the jet ski ramp expanded, and when my 8-year-old daughter tried to go for her usual morning swim, Margaret physically blocked her path and declared the beach off-limits. That was it. The moment I saw my daughter in tears, I decided it was game time. I dove into the paperwork like it was a high-stakes case. As a contracts attorney, this was my arena. I combed through every HOA charter, deed restriction, property line, and bylaw ever passed. What I found was damning. Not only did the HOA have no say over my deeded lakefront rights, but any interference would expose them to personal liability. So I drafted a formal cease and desist. Karen and Margaret had 72 hours to clear their junk or face legal action. Predictably, they laughed it off. The next morning, Karen appeared at my door in silk pajamas, Margaret behind her and a man in a wrinkled suit who she introduced as their lawyer. The guy looked like he'd learned law from YouTube. They tried everything. Karen offered to waive my HOA fees, Margaret suggested a lakefront schedule, and the lawyer mumbled something about implied easement and shared use squatter rights. I politely invited them to leave. Then, I moved to phase 2. I hired a professional surveyor who marked the legal property boundaries down to the inch. As I suspected, Margaret's lakefront resort sprawled across my property line. Armed with that evidence, I headed to the hardware store. The employee raised an eyebrow when I explained what I was building. Marking property lines, I told him with a grin. Word spread like wildfire. The next morning, I showed up at sunrise with a crew. Permits in hand. Survey stakes in place. We built the fence in a single day, a perfect line down the middle of the lakefront and dock. The symbolism? Delicious. Margaret came storming out, coffee in hand, just as the final panels went up. Her mug hit the deck. Karen arrived next, disheveled and shrieking. She called the cops. They checked my paperwork and left. She called city inspectors. They found nothing wrong. Then she tried escalating, to City Hall, to the mayor's office, possibly even the UN. Her tantrum only drew more attention. By sundown, neighbors were gathering, whispering, watching. That evening's emergency HOA meeting was packed. Karen had plastered flyers around claiming I was destroying community harmony. But instead of rallying the crowd, it backfired, hard. One by one, neighbors stood up. Retired Judge Tom Harrison opened the floor, calmly outlining Karen's legal oversteps. Sarah Chen, whose flower beds had been demolished by an unapproved Karen beautification project, laid out her own findings. More followed: misused funds, crony contracts, phantom bylaw votes. It was a takedown. Then came the kicker: Margaret's husband showed up. One look at the fence, the mess, and the audience, and he threw in the towel. He told her to pack it up. Neighbors overheard him muttering that Karen had dragged them into a stupid, expensive disaster. Karen's last move? A desperate, executive order to have the fence torn down. But the board's own legal counsel finally spoke up, flatly declaring her actions unauthorized, illegal, and grounds for immediate removal. The vote? Unanimous. Karen was done. And it didn't stop there. The board moved to file formal charges. Karen had embezzled thousands, created fake documents, and funneled HOA money into her brother-in-law's pockets. 3 months later, she stood in court, charged with fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. Guilty. She was sentenced to probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered to pay nearly $50,000 in restitution. As the gavel fell, Karen crumbled in tears. And me? I still drink my morning coffee by the water, watching the light hit that beautifully straight fence, a monument to boundaries, both physical and legal. If watching Karen's empire crumble brought you joy, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories of suburban justice. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next.